People often ask me whether we can't just come up with some magic technology, a silver bullet to solve climate change. And I wish we could, but probably we can't. We have to use all the existing tricks that we have in the book as fast as possible to reduce our emissions. But there are novel approaches, new science, new engineering, new technologies that are pretty interesting. There are plants that use big fans that take CO2, react it with chemicals, concentrate it, and then we can bury it underground. But this is all very small scale. It's also very, very expensive. And at the moment, we're not anywhere near the situation where we can rely on this sort of technology to solve climate change. There is a technology that is as old as the hills, the humble tree, which has been doing this job of taking CO2 out of the air for millennia. We could be planting a lot more trees and rewilding our ecosystems and restoring them in order to lock up CO2 underground. But we've got to look at what we're currently doing, which is unfortunately deforesting the planet at a horrific rate. It's now running at 10 million hectares roughly a year. That's 5 times the size of Wales every year. So the first task is to stop deforestation. But of course that's not easy. It's not just about technologies, it's about understanding the drivers of deforestation, people's beliefs, cultures, land rights, incentives. This is actually tricky stuff. Now it's not just trees. We've got wonderful other ecosystems, peatlands and wetlands that serve as stores of carbon. We can maintain and possibly even enhance some of these ecosystems. And the other idea that scientists are exploring is to shift the way we run our agricultural systems. At the moment, by and large, agriculture takes CO2 out of the soils and puts it up into the air. But we could run it differently. You could be capturing CO2 in the form of something called biochar, effectively a kind of charcoal, putting that into the soils, making them richer, more fertile. So used together, these various techniques, industrial processes, trees, restoration of ecosystems, shifts in agricultural practices, I think they're going to make quite a big contribution to addressing climate change. What's stopping us? Well, if you think about it, no company is actually going to earn any revenue or any income from taking CO2 out of the air and just locking it away underground. Somebody's got to pay. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that governments use taxpayers' money to make all this happen. There are other tweaks in policy that could impose obligations on existing companies to force them to pay. For instance, we could impose an obligation on fossil fuel companies to take back their waste, effectively, the CO2 that goes up into the atmosphere, and lock it underground. And this could lead to a sort of market that actually stimulated the private sector to develop these technologies, to scale them up and to reduce costs. But this isn't just about the economics. We need to think about the politics, about the social considerations, the considerations of equity and justice and culture and beliefs and narratives. This is complicated stuff. And actually, if the public isn't on board with these new approaches, they simply won't happen. So at COP26, in addition to talking about the technologies we have to reduce our emissions as fast as possible, we actually should be starting a detailed conversation about how to take CO2 out of the atmosphere and lock it away.